Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice podcast. It is so great to be with you. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist, author, and the originator of the awareness integration theory. Our heartfelt chat is about what matters most in our life, our minds, our thoughts, feelings, actions, relationships, and our fulfillment in this beautiful journey of life. I wanted to share with you Foojan app, which has just launched, and I am excited to share the Foojan app with you. Just go to wherever you get your apps, whether it's Google or app stores, and get Foojan app, Foojan. This app will take you through the whole journey of awareness integration to all of the 6 phases, looking at today and becoming aware of your thought process, emotional process, behaviors in different relationships. We look at cleaning up the past and creating and envisioning what you want, the goals for the future. This is all set up for you. And you can get to do this process in different areas of your life, whether it's in a relationship with yourself, or it is in an intimate relationship, finances, career, all the things that we have to deal with throughout life. So get it, Foojan app. I promise you, it's going to be life-changing for you. We've done a lot of research in different universities, and we've really created astonishing results based on working through this process. In minimizing depression and anxiety, raising self-esteem and self-efficacy and self-confidence. So I'm positive you're going to enjoy it. Foojan app. Now, in this episode, I get to chat with MeaganO'Nan. She is an award-winning author, a keynote speaker, and a vulnerable storytelling expert. And she is an author of the award-winning books, Creating Your Heaven on Earth, and another book is Courage, Agreeing to Disagree is Not Enough. And she has shared the stage with inspirational speakers such as Don Miguel Ruiz, author of the best-selling book, The 4 Agreements. And Meagan has appeared multiple times in local and national media. Now, most fascinating, she's received personal praise from Desmond Tutu for her splendid work for God and God's children. Meagan is also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, where she produces regular content and for Forbes.com. And you could definitely connect with her at MeaganO'Nan.com, MeaganO'Nan.com. Today, we're going to be talking about her amazing book, Held and Free, Coming Out of Your Story. And it's we get an amazing conversation, soft, beautiful, vulnerable, and powerful conversation. I really, really enjoyed this conversation, as I hope and think that you will also do. Now, subscribe to my podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, FoojanZeine.com, or any of my social media. And just know that I'd love to hear from you. So connect with me. Now, without further ado, here's MeaganO'Nan. Well, hello, Meagan. MeaganO'Nan, it's so nice to have you with us in our show.
It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Your latest book, Held and Free, Coming Out of Your Story. It's about vulnerability and how to share. And so the first question that comes up for me, and for many people I spoke with, why is it so hard to be vulnerable?
That's a really good question. And I think there's a lot of answers to that. I think for a lot of people, it's the fear of not being seen. It's the fear of not being heard. It's the, fear of being misunderstood. And I know for me, in my story, my book is all around my story of coming out and being a gay woman in Mississippi, and kind of the traumatic events that I went through, and being completely dismissed by my spiritual community, and just having a really hard time with the culture here. I know that when I sat down to have conversations with people after I was outed, that was the thing that was very, very apparent, was people just saw me as a gay woman. They didn't see me as a person anymore. I was like suddenly just a label. And so that's when it really hit home for me. This was 20 years ago, that, you know, why people don't want to be vulnerable. It's just that when you're vulnerable, it's just that fear of people not being able to see who you are anymore, and not being able to look deep into your experience and actually understand you in a way. So I understand the fear of not wanting to be vulnerable, not wanting to share who you are. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't like to be vulnerable, is just scared of being rejected.
The part that also comes up for me, in addition to what you said, is there's this innate construct of, okay, what if I'm judged? And then and I'm alone in that space, because I think there is a reality that we're not going to expect the whole world is going to like us the way we are.
Right. Yeah, totally.
You know, but there's always this fear of, what if I'm judged and I'm kind of like thrown out of the herd community completely? And then there's not an idea that I will be accepted in another community. It's more like I'll be alone. And I know from a survival perspective, obviously, if we were part of a herd and we were living in a jungle and, you know, they kind of like rejected us, that the possibility of our survival would be minimal. There are not a lot of different herds that I can just kind of like connect to. And I think part of that has stayed with us. So the fear of being rejected from the community becomes such a survival game for us, that we'll fight in any format to put on a facade as a protective shield and not bring that part of us out. And then yet internally, it destroys us when we have to hold something. Yeah. And, you know, then shame and guilt and all of that shows up.
Right.
Can you share how it was for you personally, knowing who you are, honoring yourself, but somehow you were not being honored from the external world, and how you needed to be with that?
Yeah, I very much went into my shell. I certainly went to my pen and paper. That was a big part of my own personal transformation, was writing and turning to my spirituality. And for a long time, I knew I was very different spiritually than most people. But being in the South, the context was always Christianity. And I knew I didn't fit into that box, but I didn't know where I fit because I didn't have any other role models. And so a lot of my life, I felt different already. But I kind of found this resonance with this part of me, this bigger part of me that I knew was there, and I knew it was accessible, and I knew it didn't have labels, that I was able to connect to after this experience of completely feeling rejected by my community, friends, just everyone around me. I felt very alone, exactly what you were talking about. And so diving into that space and turning to what was going on within me is really what got me through those initial years, because I didn't really have any role models to talk to spiritually, or as an LGBTQ person who had made it through what I was about to go through, who could share with me, hey, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay on the other side of this. And so it was a lot of me digging into my internal world. I went to therapy, started talking to a counselor. I was able to express my emotions. I think most of the time I just sit on our couch and cry because that's what I needed. I needed to process what I was feeling. And so I did have her. I had that support. And so those first few years were really tough. And I eventually decided to leave Mississippi and go find myself and find other ways of thinking and other ways of being in the world so that I could start to be okay with who I was. And that was a big, big, big healing adventure for me, was to just go on this journey of being away from the pressure of family, the pressure of society, the pressure of culture here, so that I could identify who I was and find a way to start being okay with that. And so that was another part of my discovery in my process of trying not to feel so alone and so lonely the way I was feeling when I first came out. And so that's those, those first formative years after all of that happened, that's really how I dealt with it.
So when you find yourself, what is that experience like?
I think it's an ongoing experience. It's not something that you just, I think it just gets easier as you age and as you have other experiences and you grow. And I was gone from Mississippi for 6 or 7 years. When I finally got to the point, I realized that if I didn't come back home and face the hard conversations and be in the culture and find a way to be okay with myself within the culture, that I wasn't going to heal fully. I wasn't going to love myself fully. So for me in my journey, I chose to come back and challenge myself personally to really be okay with who I was. And I'm not saying that's what everybody needs to do. This is just what I needed to do for me. And so when we first got back to Mississippi, this was 2010, it was hard for me to be out and proud. I hid my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, from our landlord because I didn't want him to know I was living with a woman. I had so much shame around who I was. And I thought I was in this really good place, right? I'm going to go back to Mississippi and be this trailblazer. And when we got here, it was like, no, I'm not ready for this. And it was really difficult. And it was years of me working on myself consciously and really working up the courage to be who I am. And so it's just been this ongoing journey of just challenging myself to be even more authentic, even more vulnerable, even more authentic, even more vulnerable. And after it's been almost 13 years since I came back, I'm at a place now where, I'm married, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I'm just in this place of wholeness and fulfillment. Hard stuff still happens. I'm not saying that life isn't difficult, but it is difficult and challenging. But I have built this foundation within myself that has helped me know that I can get through anything. Like whatever comes my way, I know I'll get through it. It does not matter what it is. And I think that's ultimately what I wanted, was that inner peace within myself that was strong enough to sustain whatever life was going to throw at me. And that's what I've been working on and cultivating over the years. And so, yeah, I think I know I'll be challenged further and I'll grow further, but I think it's just that intention over the years of just really actively paying attention to what I need and how I need to speak my truth when it's necessary. And that's been a big part of really being okay with who I am.
Meagan, isn't that speaking the truth also needed to be a right for you internally before you could find the strength to come
What
back?
do you mean?
Like, for example, for me, as you were sharing, this showed up, which is sometimes like I work with clients who from the LGBTQ, and they're like, you know what? I'm gonna hide because I don't want to change. I can't change my society, so I'm just gonna hide.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes I share with them, it's like, well, it's almost like you don't give yourself the right to be who
Yeah.
you really are.
Yeah, I love that.
When you were sharing, I was like, well, coming to ourselves, it's another piece of me having the right to be who I am. Not only I don't have the right to be, but there's a split in me. And then the society, I don't want the society to see a part of me, because if the society is going to have some sort of a judgment, then I will hold their shame. And then,
Exactly.
right, and then attach it to myself, because that's what the society wants me to, because they want me to change and be just like them. And then I lose the right that no, I am who I am. And it's not that I'm different. I am who I am.
Yeah.
But I have the right to be. And
Exactly.
not the same as you, then you deal with it. I'm fine. I'm dealing with mine. And I think there's a strength that comes with that piece of, I'm okay with who I am. And that's what I was hearing when you said, I had to find myself.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, it's when the next level of, I think, the integration happens, which is, I'm going to now go to the society and have the strength that, okay, it's going to come at me. It's going to come at me. And I'm going to hold space and say,
Exactly.
I am who I am.
I love that. Beautifully said.
Yeah. Well, your book is called Held and Fear. This is the book coming out of your story by MeaganO'Nan.
Yeah.
And when you talk about held, what do you, why held? And then what, and the fear.
So it's held and free. And so held is, I've always had this perspective that I am being spiritually, I would say, held. I believe things happen for me and not to me. And I've always had this perspective, even as a kid. I just believe there was something more than just myself, and I've always felt very held by that. And I feel very lucky that I have that. And I write about it in my book, and I talk about not really fitting in. I was raised Catholic, and not really fitting in I didn't really understand why the church was the way it was, meaning, how come only men could be in leadership? And why are we talking about sin? And what does that mean? And so I was always questioning things with my parents. And my mom never really knew how to answer me. I was the deepest probably of her three children. I asked the really hard questions. But what I do remember is that when I would come to her and say, hey, Mom, I'm scared. I was just scared of the infiniteness and the unknown and all of the unanswered questions that I had. And she would just hold me, and she would make me feel so safe. She wouldn't have the answers, but I knew she loved me, and she held me, and she made me feel safe. And so now that I have a daughter, that's the kind of mom I want to be. Is I want her to feel held, because I felt held as a kid, even though I wasn't understood. And I've carried that experience of my mom forward into my life, really truly believing that I am being held, and that everything that's happening outside of me is here for me in some way. And so I've tried really hard not to have a victim mindset when I look at situations, and tried really hard not to point the finger and blame other people and tell people they're right or they're wrong, because it's, that's what I've experienced so much of, and I don't want to give that back to the world. And so that's what I mean when I say held, is just, that layer, that feeling of believing and really having faith in the process of life, that it's in my best interest no matter what happens. But also as a mom, it's a really important thing for me to give my daughters, for her to feel held the way I did when I was a kid. And then the free part is, I like the contrast. It's being held, but also being free. Being free to choose, being free to be who you are, being free to share your story, being free to go out into the world however you want to be or however you want to present it. Freedom, inner freedom, is something I think we all really just want, is to you kind of spoke about it a minute ago, is being able to be yourself and be okay with any other opinion that comes at you. So that's what I like, the contrast of both of those things. And they both have been very important to me in my life and everything I've done. And again, it's what I want to give my daughter. I want her to always feel held and free. I don't want to put her in a box. I don't want to label her. I want her to just know I'm here for her, but also be free to be who she is, whoever that is.
So as you share your story with the world and you support the other people to share their vulnerable story, what do you suggest for people to go through as they want to share with the world the part of them that feels vulnerable?
It's a really good question. I get asked this a lot, and I think it's different for everybody. And it's important that if you're thinking about sharing your story, that you really ask yourself what you're ready for. I began by journaling, and sharing my stories with myself. Then I started talking to a therapist in a safe space. And I think that's a really good place for people to start, is just process your stories with yourself. Process your stories in a journal, or record yourself, or video yourself, or just say them. Just say them out loud so they're not embedded in your being, because when they come out, there's some kind of healing process that happens. And I'm a huge advocate for therapy or coaching or whatever it is, creating a safe space for yourself to be heard by someone that is safe. And when you do that, it just allows you even more freedom to say even more. And I think that's always a really great place to start. And as you get stronger and you feel more confident in who you are, then, there are 1,000 ways to share your story, whether it be through podcast or writing blogs or your book or speaking, or you can go on and on and on. Sharing your stories with your friends, your coworkers. The list can go on and on, but I think it's just really important to evaluate where you are and what you're ready for as you go. But starting small, I think, is a really smart place to start.
I really love what you said, because first of all, the sharing through journaling, I think it releases a lot of, the excess emotions that are around it. So obviously we bring the two sides of the brain together. But there's also this aspect of talking where I can hear myself. And, it's different when you journal than you talk and you hear your own voice. And as it shows up, it starts getting power when you voice it. Yeah. And, you get used to your own voice and you hearing yourself, and you modify the way you say it. I've noticed people, the first time they say things, they're like still shying away or getting afraid, or, their voice is shaking. And then by the second, third, fourth time, like you could see this shrink through your voice. And then, having somebody to hear it that accepts it and mirrors it, and then it gets stronger and stronger. And I think that really helps to bring strength into vulnerability, or strength around the vulnerability. Exactly. We are holding the strength around our own vulnerability, not necessarily that we'll say, the vulnerability needs to change. I think when the strength is around it, then it protects us. It's like we protect ourselves regardless of what actually happens out there.
I love that.
So it's important for us actually to hear our own vulnerable side and honor it, and then protect it. You talk a lot about forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Who did you need to forgive?
Myself.
For
not being true to myself. And looking back, I remember being in a situation where I was having a conversation with these two Baptist ministers, and they were talking to me about the sin of being gay and that I was going to burn in hell, and, giving me the whole spiel. And I was really young at the time. And I just remember kind of like sinking into the pew and being very in a church and just shutting off. And we got to the end of the conversation, or I guess I should say like the end of the, they're preaching to me. And they said, "So are you still in a relationship with a woman?" And at the time I was. And I remember lying and saying no, because I really just needed to get out of the conversation. But looking back, I wish I had been in a place where I could have said yes. And the not being true to myself and not being able to just say who I am or what I want or what I need, those indiscretions have been the hardest for me to deal with. And that's the thing that has pushed me forward in choosing myself and wanting to just be real, so that I'm not stuffing who I am. And so that's been a really big part of forgiveness for me, is really forgiving myself for not just being true to myself. And I know it's been a process, and I honor that. But as I was going through the process, that was the hard thing for me, when I just didn't have that courage to just be okay in that moment when somebody said, hey, is that who's that woman? Like, why couldn't I just introduce her as my wife? Or why couldn't I just hold her hand when I wanted to? Those kinds of things. But more than that, it's, who I am spiritually. It's who I am as a person, and just not being authentic in any area are the things that I have most struggled with around forgiveness, and the thing that has pushed me forward. Not to say there hasn't been relationships that have needed forgiving. There have been people that have needed forgiving, and things that I've had to work through. And that has been a big part of it. So, I think there's a lot of aspects of forgiveness to talk about.
Can you forgive others for not having the ability or choosing not to accept?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've learned that art over the years, just in being here. And I think one of the things that has helped me do that is being able to be myself fully and express myself vulnerably. That is the thing that detaches me from anyone else's perception, or anyone else's judgment, or anyone else's lack of acceptance. I am so okay with where anyone stands if I'm able to just put myself out there. And I see that now, all these years later, like, that's the thing that detaches me the most, is when I show up, most people will show up with me. But if they don't, I'm so okay with that, because I showed up. So yes, that's the way I see it, is through my own vulnerability. That is the thing that has given me the strength to detach from anyone's opinion or anyone's lack of acceptance.
Right. I know for me, it came with age, which was like, you know what, it's okay if you don't like all that I do.
Yeah.
Or areas of me. I am who I am. And
right.
And as long as I'm okay, as long as I can be on integrity, and I can take a stand for a value or a behavior that I do, that I think it's right.
Yeah.
Then it's okay if you don't approve of me. But the other side of it was also, I think, Meagan, is like, you know what? You're not a threat to me, and I'm not a threat to you. Like, I don't want harm for you, and you're not a threat to me, even though you might, you don't want any behavior that I do. And I think that also has helped this concept of like separation from the toxicity of the judgments, whether it was mine toward them or them toward me, right? Because that's how it feels. Like, if I feel threatened by somebody judging me, we automatically, as a human being, judge them back.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, all right, I can't control their judgment, but can I control my judgment toward them? And it's like, all right, I'll accept you, but you don't accept all that I do. And I probably, won't like a lot of stuff that you do, but it's okay. Like, we could be different in who we are.
Right.
And I think that probably allows a little bit more of that process of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Kind of like flourish, in a sense, and be there.
Right.
So as you have come to your strength, how is life different for you with your wife and your daughter? And how do any of that has changed your perspective in the community you live, as far as areas of your life? So your home life, relationship, and family structure, you've kind of gained and said, this is my family structure. How does this now affect, for example, your role in the community, your role in your work, in your career, finances, social setting, and all of it, as you've come to kind of like a space, in kind of a centered space within yourself?
It affects everything. I feel centered in all of those areas. So it's just one, they all run together. For me, they run together. I feel when I go into my community, or, doing a speaking engagement, or a social event, or, I'm interacting, it's just, I am so secure in who I am that I'm just me now.
Mhm.
And that feels really good, where for so long I just felt like I wanted to run and hide. And so I have completely transformed that part of me. I think I used to be very much an introvert, and now I'm like, I can't wait to see people. So that part of me has really changed. And in my work, I'm at the top of my career right now. I am flourishing, and I love every day of everything I do in my work, except paperwork. That can get a little bit old. But taxes, that kind of stuff. But I really do love my work. I feel very centered in that. I feel very centered in who I am. And in my relationship with my wife and my daughter, she's 4, so she can be very challenging sometimes, but it just pushes me. It pushes me to be even better of a person. And so I adore my home and my family. And I just feel very lucky, honestly. I have a really great relationship with my parents. And I mean, again, we have our challenges, but we work through them. And I feel like I'm just surrounded by people who will work through things with me. I don't feel alone. And when something hard comes up, I feel like I can talk about it and we can work through it together. And so I've worked really hard to surround myself with those kinds of relationships. And so, anyway, yeah, I think one affects the other, and that when it comes down to all of the aspects of my life, I think there's definitely a centered feeling.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Held and Free, everyone. Coming Out of Your Story by MeaganO'Nan. Meagan, anything that you want to share specifically, whether it's with the LGBTQ community, someone who's trying to share and share their vulnerabilities, or someone in the heterosexual community, or just people that are listening, that you really want to share and we haven't touched upon as we've talked, there are points that you want them to know?
Yeah, I think I kind of have like this 3-step process of owning yourself, or coming into yourself. And the first one is owning your story. We've talked about that, really being okay with what your stories have been and who you are, and actually getting into that part of acceptance, I guess, self-acceptance of what your journey has been so far. And I think telling your stories is a very good way to do that. And then the second part is sharing, beginning to share those with other people in whatever format you feel comfortable with. And then using that to then jump to connecting with others, and actually surrounding yourself with a supportive environment of people who know who you are, love who you are, and it's reciprocated, and really building that connection to self and your community. So own, share, connect is kind of that 3-step process that I think is a really powerful one to go through, just for coming into yourself and coming into self-acceptance and living in a more authentic and vulnerable way.
Yes, absolutely. I think there's an acceptance of what reality looks like. We had a conversation I was lecturing yesterday, and this was a conversation that showed up again, actually was especially in some communities. I come from a Middle Eastern community, which has a lot of still biases when it comes to the LGBTQ. And part of our conversation it was asked as I was lecturing, like, how do we create that kind of an acceptance? And I remember talking to one of my great friends, and she's part of the community of the LGBTQ. And she says, I support the day that we don't call it acceptance and tolerance, and somehow we call it indifference, because it is. It just,
I love that.
It's like we don't have to have a conversation and an issue. It just is. And
I agree.
And yesterday, as I was sharing, it was like, what? If you look at facts, the facts are that there's all of it. There's fluidity. There's all of that is around. I was talking to a cardiologist, which he had to get a genetic test from this woman who was around 50 years of age. And he found out by the genetic test that this woman was actually a male by chromosomes.
Oh, wow.
At age 50, had to give, not the issue of, whether you have cancer or genetic cancer or not was not the issue anymore. It was like, surprise.
Wow.
You are actually another gender, and you've been living and expressing yourself as this gender throughout these years. And, talking to so many people, which is like, there's this fluidity of, we're just different and it's okay, whether it's our identity or orientation or preferences or however you look at it, it's just, we're different and it's okay to be different. And we're so similar on so many other layers that you can focus, like what you said at the beginning, can we just focus on one difference, or can we focus that we're all different some way? And we usually connect, friendships and communities usually connect on similarities. They don't connect on differences.
Exactly.
Every one of us can connect somehow with each other from one angle and honor our differences from different places.
Yeah.
So it's this, maybe expansion that creates that inclusivity, which is, every one of us somehow are different, and then so many similarities. And how can I honor both necessarily? And then I think that might hold us in a place of being curious and excited about getting
exactly
to know,
Yeah. And storytelling is such a great way to do that. You hear somebody's story and you're just sucked in and you just want to know about their experience, and then your world is blown and your mind is blown because they've let you in, and then you're open to sharing. And so that's why I love to talk about storytelling, because it's such a powerful art to do exactly what you're talking about, is like just being okay with whatever. I had a really close friend of mine I grew up with the other day. She came to tell me that her son came out to her, and this new generation coming up, it's not as big of a deal for them. It's like, why do we have to come out? It's so silly, like, why can't we just show up with our girlfriend or our boyfriend at the next family function and it'd be okay? And I think we're heading that way. I really do. I mean, I see it happening with this new generation where they don't want to make a big announcement because it's just no big deal to them, and that's how it all should be, is just show up, be yourself, and that's it.
And it is. It's just,
it is. Yeah, exactly.
Where can people find you, Meagan?
The easiest place is on my website, MeaganO'Nan.com, MeaganO'Nan.com, and everything is there.
Beautiful. Any last parting words?
Oh, thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you so much for the time you allowed with us. And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.